Hey, it's Jonathan, and if you are watching this, then that means you found the money button, you found my YouTube course, and yeah, I figured, gosh, it's been about 10 years since I recorded that. I was in my mid-30s at the time, and the principles that you're about to learn had produced about 25 million for my business. I am now in my mid to late 40s, and the same principles have produced about 400 million for my business. So big changes in terms of revenue that's been produced. But yeah, I've learned a few things along the way, and I figured why not start by sharing some of those here and also giving you some context for what you are about to learn. So I guess I'd start by saying what you're about to learn are principles of selling, of persuasion, of conversion, and I hope that if you're an online business owner, if you're a marketer, you will find a way to apply them. When I was a lot younger, I was very, very insecure, and I sort of set out to learn like how to persuade people because I felt like if I could persuade people, then I could get what I wanted out of relationships. I've since learned that's not really the truth, and done a lot of self-exploration, self-evolution to become, a full human being and have great relationships that don't require persuasion. But along the way, I learned all these principles, found that they apply really well to sales. And so whether you're doing online sales or even in-person sales, I think that the principles you're about to learn here will be useful to you in some way, shape, or form. Some context on the way that I teach these principles. It's all through the lens of, or mostly through the lens of what I call the VSL or video sales letter. And if you don't know that term, you might know it as an infomercial. It's like a 20 to 40 minute video where you're trying to take somebody from, I've never heard of you before, to please take a lot of my money now. I desperately want what you have to sell. So it's a very compressed purchasing cycle where you're trying to go through a lot of gates very quickly. You're trying to build their curiosity. You're trying to establish trust and authority. You're trying to position your product very uniquely relative to everything else that they've tried. And then you're presenting an offer. You're doing, risk management, all these things that have to exist for every sale. You're just trying to do it in a very specific structure and in a very compressed time period. And so if we were to look, for example, at our customer data and the number of customers we acquire on first touch, it's probably higher than the average business because we are not brand first. We're not even product first. We're trying to grab the curiosity click, drive it to that website, use more curiosity to suck them in, and then bring them through that experience. That has pros and cons that I'll get to in a second. But what I do want to make sure you understand is that these same principles apply no matter what form you're selling in. You can use them. You don't need to write a 20 to 40 minute VSL. In fact, I advise that you don't. You can write a 2 to 4 minute VSL. You can even take that copy and put it into a text ad that sits with a static. You can put it onto a landing page. You can do a lot of things with this and with these principles that do not require a VSL. On the note of VSLs, we still run them internally. They still work quite well for us. They do attract a certain type of customer. They attract a customer who is willing to sit for long periods of time to watch a video. That typically skews older. I don't know how long that will work. What's interesting is that since I launched this, the men's dating advice market, which I'll get to in a second, has really moved on from VSLs. That's where I made all of my initial money, and they've really, VSLs are not a thing for them anymore. Just having them sit for long periods of time, there's other ways that they consume content. We're in other markets now where our consumers will sit for long periods of time, but I don't know how long that'll last. So that's one sort of strike against VSLs, if you will. They still work very well, but you're kind of dealing with a certain type of population who you may or may not want for your business. They're typically more also problem loyal than they are brand loyal. So they're not as interested in the brand. The brand matters to them to the degree that maybe the product experience matters. But what's more important to them is, can this product solve my problem in a unique way that works different than anything I've tried before? And so you might acquire some magic bean hunters in your customer cohort rather than people who are built over time, multiple exposure to your brand, and who become more brand loyal or brand expectant than product expectant. So again, just some nuances about VSL customers, but all these principles work no matter how you apply them. In terms of the market that I was in, so when I launched this, the only market that I'd succeeded in was in men's dating advice. So as I mentioned, I was very insecure as a child. That persisted into my 20s. And so I discovered this community that I like to think of as a dating advice community. Some people call it the pickup artist community. And I worked with a guy who was a coach, or actually sort of a leading mind in that community. Went on to create my own business when I couldn't get a job in 2008. And I thought it'd be like kind of a 6-month thing, and then it became a 10-year thing. And coaching became creating courses, and courses became learning copywriting, and copywriting became a VSL for this course that I created called the Girlfriend System. And that is a lot of the context under which these principles are taught in the Money Button, is the Girlfriend System video sales letter. It was sort of a masterwork when I launched it. I was $100,000 in debt. Within a couple weeks, I was about like $200,000 up in my bank account. Those things don't really happen anymore. The market has changed, but it's still a great VSL to this day. We're not using it anymore. We've since shut down the Social Man, and that's another course that's sitting on a Google Drive somewhere, like this one was for 10 years. I don't know if I'll ever release it again, to be honest with you. But yeah, so that's the context in which all of this was taught, is through that Girlfriend System course. But since that time, I've gone on to sell products. I've sold supplements, I've sold skincare, I've sold e-commerce. So these principles have worked in a lot of different markets for a lot of different, let's call it acquisition formats. And they've worked for our sales team, they've worked for customer support. So you don't, just as you're going through it, and as I'm talking about the Girlfriend System specifically, or principles that you're learning from it, you just have to sort of transpose that to how does this apply to my business. And I don't advise getting into the men's dating advice business anymore. It's dominated by guys like Andrew Tate, and unless you want to be, competing against that, I'm happy for somebody else to do it. Why am I releasing this now? I just want to answer that question real briefly. So when I created this course, my plan was to sort of transition from like, okay, I did it, and now I'm going to teach you how to do it, and I'm going to build a business around teaching you how to do it. I think that's an impulse that a lot of people have. I started running ads for it, and then I decided I didn't want to be a make money guru. I didn't want to have to take pictures of myself on private jets, or invite people into my personal life, or do any of the things that represent sort of like I've made it and you can too. And that ended up being the right choice for me. I was very happy being behind the scenes in all of our other businesses so far. And every now and then I'll pop on camera as a spokesperson for something we're doing, but I just like being behind the scenes. And so this has been sitting on a Google Drive for like 10 years. And recently I thought to myself, gosh, there's really good stuff in here. Every now and then on X, I see people saying like, hey, what's the best copywriting course out there? I don't think this is necessarily it. I think it's great though. And I think that it deserves to be like up there in maybe the top 10. So figured, heck, just release it for free. And hopefully people will like it, and they'll enjoy it, and they'll get a lot of value out of it. What I will say is I have zero interest and zero time to do like any coaching, any critiquing, any business advice, any of that. I'm operating 2 businesses of my own right now. I have 2 children who are very young still, and I have a very active life that is full of adventure sports and travel. So my time, every hour counts, and I can spare no extra time, at least at this point in my life. Check in with me in 20 years. We'll see if that's true when my kids are out of the house. But for now, I'm just very engaged with all the things that I'm engaged with. So if you enjoy this, by all means, hit me up on X. Tell me if you liked it. Leave comments below. My X handle is jch.me, jchdotme. But yeah, I just want to share this with the world and hope that it creates some value. The one exception is if you want to work for me and you're really, really, really good and you learn some cool stuff from this, then hit me up on X and we'll figure out how to look at some of your work and get you into our recruiting system. Okay, so just a few things that I want to share before we jump into the material in terms of big lessons I've learned in the last 10 years that relate to what you're about to learn. So one of the big things is that different markets respond to different principles in different ways. And I'll give you a very easy example is the men's dating advice market responds very well to shame. So, the negative stories, the nightmare stories, that I know this is how you feel. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you probably feel this way and it feels awful, and all that stuff, right? The men's dating advice market responds to shame. Selling skincare to women, they do not respond to shame. They do not want to be shamed. They want to be made to feel glamorous. They want curiosity. They want secrets. They want hope. So just two different markets with two different responses to nightmare versus dream scenario, which you'll learn about in this principle. And that took years to discover. So as a copywriter, as a marketer, as an owner, one of the best things you can do is take the principles that are in this course and inject them into your ads, sort of at the tip of the spear, and see, how do people respond to this? So take a nightmare story that creates a lot of shame and put it right at the start of an ad, and then put a dream story right at the start of an ad, and see which one gets higher engagement, which one gets higher click-through. The more time that you spend selling to your particular customer, your particular market, and trying to apply these principles, the more that you'll see the contours of what they respond to. And that's something that it's why I always recommend bringing your copywriters in-house and having people specialize on the same customer for long periods of time, because they're going to learn those nuances and they're going to be able to speak to those customers in ways that somebody who is just kind of oh yeah, I know copywriting and I'm just going to write the same sort of format I've written before, they're not typically going to have the same success. So that's one big learning. A second thing I wrote down is a good VSL can't save you from a bad product or market, and that's partially true. I know some guys who are running hundreds of millions of dollars with deepfake VSLs selling the most bullshit products in existence. They are very unethical. They are out of this country. They are not typically under the jurisdiction of U.S. law, and yet they make a lot of money. The problem with that is you don't build brand, you don't build enterprise value. It is a cash grab, and it worked very well for them, but they're basically setting up new LLCs nonstop in non-extradition countries and running all these backdoor operations through shady payment processors, and so there's no business there to sell. It's just a cash grab. I don't like it. I'm annoyed about it because I have to compete in the same ad space, and if you really want to build enterprise value, if you want to build a great company, if you want to attract great people who aren't just mercenaries, not really the way to go. So yeah, if you want, a great VSL, all these great marketing principles, all these strong persuasion principles, I really hope that you back them up with an amazing product, an amazing customer experience, an amazing customer support experience. I view those as three different things. The product itself is does it deliver the results? How does it make people feel? How do they enjoy it? The customer experience is the touch points they get in the email, when they open the product, the unboxing, all of that. And then the customer support experience is when they write into the company, what is their experience interacting with your team. So all these things that you're about to learn about marketing and sales persuasion, all that, I'd say in terms of bringing in new customers, it's super, super, super important, but in terms of keeping those customers and building a really valuable brand, it is all about the product experience, the customer experience, and the customer support experience. The market itself, a good VSL will not save you from a bad market. So there's two things that I consider to be not such great markets. One of them is markets of small, you call them small TAMs, total addressable market. So I'm reminded of a guy who, I don't know him well, but I really respect him. He used to sell swords online. He's this amazing content creator. And then he went into selling candy. Now, the market for candy versus the market for swords is a million times bigger, right? And so that's just a really good example of if you're selling a really, really, really niche product, it doesn't matter how good the marketing is, you're going to cap out. And that was my experience with men's dating advice. It is a pretty big market, but it's not nearly as big as some of the other markets that we've gone into since then. And another thing about bad markets is bad customers. So I'll give you this example. I've never really had great success in weight loss. I've written a few weight loss sales letters. They haven't really worked well. But we also really haven't made it a pillar of okay, we're going to go after this and die on this hill. I do know some people who have had a lot of success in weight loss, and the customers that they have attracted have been very high churn. The weight loss customers who buy pills online for weight loss, they have to cram as much customer value, the companies, into that first interaction as possible, because the customers don't want to do the other things they need to do to lose weight. And they typically are, as I think I mentioned earlier, they are more loyal to solving their problem than they are to any particular brand. So they will go from brand to brand to brand, from product to product to product, but they won't stick, they won't retain. And so you're basically just, on the flywheel of Mark Zuckerberg's ad machine, trying to bring in more customers nonstop. And in a couple cases, friends of mine who have had businesses in this space, they don't even try with brand. They just launch new products that are totally unrelated brands, and sort of like the scammers that I was talking about earlier, they're just cash grab machines. So it's not how I like to operate. I like to quote Naval, play long-term games with long-term people. And we've built our brand to try to sustain itself, and we're certainly still on the hamster wheel in terms of customer acquisition, but we have much better retention, and that is because of the markets we've picked and the way that we treat our customers. So just again, something I've learned, something that's hopefully useful for you. Okay, a few more points. At a certain point, the operations and the marketing systems matter much more or equal amount to what you're about to learn in terms of building really compelling marketing. So the operations, when we built Girlfriend, and I hope I'm not repeating myself here, but this is like my fourth take on this. So I might have said this before in this video, or I might have said it in a previous one. When we built the Girlfriend system operation up to about 20 million, it was only me and a few other people, and we were very, very good at a few things. We were great at customer support, which we had to be because big claims, people write in, hey, I'm not getting this result. So we had to make sure that we had super on top of it customer support. They were really responsive to our customers. Second thing was payment processing. So there was no shop pay at the time, and we ran a really aggressive billing model. And so we had to be super dialed in on payment processing. These are not problems that I discuss in the money button. They're problems that I hope you don't have to deal with. To this day, interestingly, just last week, we got hammered by somebody who was doing what's called bin checking. They had stolen a bunch of credit cards on the dark web, and they were trying to use one of our payment gateways to just ram them through thousands a second and validate which ones would work and which ones didn't. So even to this day, we still need that sort of operation to defend against these assholes, if I can say that. But those are the operations that we needed at the time to scale that business. Now that we're in physical products, it's gotten so much more intense. Cash flow management, demand forecasting, inventory management. Speaking of scammers, we just had a pallet of products stolen off of a truck some way between our manufacturing facility and our fulfillment facility. So you just need great operations to deal with all the challenges that will come up, and I am not that person. That is my partner Steve, our COO. Thank God he exists, and thank God that people like that exist. So, that'll get you good operations plus good marketing, get you to 20, 50 million maybe. Getting from 50 to 100 is, in my opinion, the next challenge is marketing systems and scaling your marketing team. And this is also something I'm very bad at. So it is taking the principles that you're learning here and figuring out how to diffuse them through your company, through production, through different channels, through budgets, through forecasting of ad spend, through campaign management. There are people who are great at this stuff. They are professionals at it. I am not one of them, but in my experience and my direct experience, that is the thing that's required to go beyond that $50 million level, is to, again, take these principles and apply them systematically throughout the business and have really, really great marketing systems and marketing operations. Again, I can't really help you with that. Maybe some of my people can at some point. Maybe we'll get them to create a course, but that is far from my skill. And really, to be sitting on top of this business right now, we're not some massive empire, but we have, as I record this, about 120 people on the team. What has gotten me here and what has allowed me to attract amazing people to solve these other problems is the principles that you're learning in this course. It's been the ability to pick the right markets, pick great products, and write really compelling marketing around them, and generate a lot of money that then creates a lot of problems, and not just money, sales, to create problems for other people to solve. And so on that note, the last thing I'd say is the importance of team and the people in your life. I've cycled through a lot of different people in my company, but we do have a great record of retaining great people. Our culture is very unique, and we've been remote 100% of the time. But if you are not thinking about company culture, start thinking about it. Start thinking about what values you personally own and personify, and how you can bring those into a team culture. Several years ago, we implemented something called EOS, or Entrepreneur Operating System. We went through this whole exercise of like, what are our company values? And I kind of thought it was BS at the time. But in retrospect, what I've realized is that people who adhere to our company values and who match them, they stick and they become typically very good. People who do not match the company values do not last. And so they've become a really strong screening tool for us. And attracting great people, it's not just about the skills, it's about the values that they bring. And so I encourage you to be thinking about that as you're growing your company. And on that note, sort of like a final, very personal thing to share here, it's not just the team you're working with, it is the 2 or 3 closest people in your life who you're working with as well. Actually, I'll get to that in a second because I do want to give a couple shouts out to people who definitely deserve it. I'd be remiss not to talk about Craig Clemens, Frank Kern, Chris Haddad, let's see who else, Gary Bensavanga, and John Benson. I think I just named 5 people. Those 5 people, I learned a lot from them in terms of the principles that are in this course, either directly or indirectly. And David Garfinkel. So all these guys are copywriting legends. I'll start with Craig. He sort of pioneered the VSL in the health space. I'd say greatest of all time. And he is, if you want to learn video sales letters, look at his VSLs, break them down, hand copy them. He is a legend. John Benson arguably invented the VSL. He does have a course or 2 out there, and he does do some coaching as well, or at least last I checked he did. I learned quite a bit from him working with him directly. Chris Haddad is another one. He has, last I checked, courses out there. I've done 1 or 2 coaching calls with him. David Garfinkel was my initial copywriting coach. I really got my start with him. And he taught me how to go from being like a good writer to being a good copywriter, and how to really simplify words, language, etc. Gary Bensavanga was like a legend. I had this course called Bensavanga Bullets that probably made its way into my brain, and probably some of the stuff made its way into here. There's a lot of others, and Frank Kern was like a legendary marketer who I studied for a long time. I think there's probably some of his material in here, not intentionally, probably subconsciously, but again, just have to give shouts out to all these guys because I don't want anybody to look at my material and think, wow, this is just all sprouted from my head. This was the result of years of learning, symbiosis, coaching from other people, and I would be remiss not to give credit where credit is due. And then finally, actually, somebody else who deserves a lot of credit is my former partner, Dave. Dave Z, as he's known. So Dave and I were competitors in the men's dating advice space. Then we partnered up and we created our health companies together. And I learned a heck of a lot from him. You'll hear me talk about him earlier or later in the Money Button. He was somebody who pushed me a lot in terms of copy. He introduced me to Frank Kern, and we created a lot of great things together. About 3 years ago now, Dave took his own life, and he was a genius. He was a really big heart, but he also had some real big challenges psychologically and emotionally. And it was really tragic. We had not been very close for about a year, even though we were still partners. He had sort of exited the company, and or at least in terms of how he was working and how he was engaged with us, and left Steve and I to carry on the torch. And at that point, the great burden. We had about $1 million in debt to me, but I'd put about $1 million into the business. And we were still at the bottom of the trough, but yeah, without him we wouldn't be here, and it was a very tough time because about a month before that I had also lost my daughter. She died 2 weeks before she was born, and it was just a really, really difficult time in my life. It had been a year of difficulty. The prior summer, just like everything had gone wrong that could have gone wrong in the business. We had ad accounts go down, we had payment accounts go down. We had inventory that was a year plus back ordered, and I just had to keep shoveling money in. And so when those 2 events happened, it was kind of like it was definitely the deepest trough of the valley that I have ever personally lived in. But back to team, back to the people in your life. 2 particular people in my life, my wife and my partner Steve, they were amazing, and I tried to be amazing to them too. And sort of, separately but together, we made it through that experience. And life is very, very good again, despite our losses. Never would have expected either of those losses, and certainly wouldn't have expected them in such a compressed time period. But if there's like sort of one masterpiece of advice that I just want to share while I have the stage, however tiny the stage is, it's that the 2 to 3 closest people in your life will be the wind at your back or the anchor that drags you down. I've had partners, girlfriends who have dragged me down, and in retrospect, I was like, I knew it. I could have seen that coming. And now, in retrospect, looking at the choice I made about who I married and the choice I made about who I partnered with Steve, it couldn't have been more obvious. These are people who are high integrity. They do the right thing when nobody's looking. They challenge me to be better, and I challenge them to be better. And so again, as we sort of wrap here, as we get into the Money Button course, I felt like I had to sneak that in. It was been like the biggest learning of the last 10 years of my life. Certainly responsible for some of the wrinkles and some of the hair loss. And on the note of hair loss, one last thing. As I was watching these videos, I've been watching these videos in ages, and I was like, what the hell was I thinking with that neck beard? So you will see that in like half the videos, I had this like I just hadn't shaved my neck. I don't know what I was thinking back then. I'm sure somebody's gonna leave comments about it, but I just wanted to get ahead of that. I don't know what I was thinking, but these days, that doesn't happen anymore. So with that, I hope you enjoy the course. Again, I'm not doing coaching, but if it connects with you in some way, if it helps you in some way, hit me up. I'd love to hear about it. Maybe, I don't know, take it, feed it into an LLM, create some principles out of it. I have very low expectations, but high hopes that it helps a lot of people. So thank you for joining me here, and God bless and good luck.